She was just a cleaner trying to get to work. One splash of mud changed her life. The woman who mocked her had no idea. Someone powerful was watching. It was a cold, quiet morning. The sky was grey and the road was still wet from last night's rain. Grace, a young woman in her early 20s, walked carefully along the roadside, holding her small bag of breakfast and a pair of old cleaning gloves. Her uniform was clean but worn out, and her shoes were almost giving way. Still, she walked with purpose. She didn't want to be late for her cleaning job at Grandview Towers. As she neared the main road, she heard the loud roar of a car engine. A shiny white SUV was speeding towards her. Before she could step away, the tires hit a deep puddle. In one awful moment, muddy water splashed all over her. Her face, her clothes, her bag. Everything was soaked and dirty. The SUV didn't stop. Instead, the tinted window rolled down just enough to show a well-dressed woman laughing. Her lipstick was bright red, and she wore huge sunglasses. "Watch where you stand next time," she shouted before zooming off. Grace stood there in shock. Her lips trembled, her eyes burned. But she didn't cry. She just picked up her muddy bag and continued walking. From across the street, a black car sat quietly. Inside was a man named Samuel, a silent observer. He had watched the entire thing happen, the splash, the laugh, the shame on Grace's face. Samuel's eyes narrowed. He knew the rich lady Diana. She was famous for her fashion line and her pride, but what she didn't know was that today her actions had been witnessed by someone who didn't believe in letting people suffer silently. He picked up his phone. "Find out who that girl is," he said calmly. "I want to know everything." Grace arrived at Grandview Towers looking like a storm had passed over her. Her once clean uniform now had brown stains, her hair stuck to her face, and her shoes squished with every step. As she stepped into the side entrance, her supervisor, Mr. Thompson, frowned. "Grace, you're late. And what is this mess?" he barked. She lowered her eyes. "I was splashed by a car. I tried to clean up, but—" "No excuses," he snapped. "Get to work. This place needs to be spotless before the guests arrive." Grace nodded and walked toward the cleaning closet. Her co-workers glanced at her, some shook their heads in pity, but no one spoke, no one helped. She changed into an old backup uniform, tied her hair up, and got to cleaning like nothing had happened. But inside, Grace was hurting. She thought of her little sister back at home, still sleeping in their one-room apartment. She thought of the job she couldn't afford to lose. So she pushed through. Meanwhile, Samuel sat in his office, a tall glass building downtown. He wasn't just any man. He was one of the city's youngest CEOs, a quiet billionaire who preferred to observe than talk. His assistant brought in the file he requested. "Her name is Grace Okoro, age 23, works 2 cleaning jobs, lives in Green Valley, takes care of her younger sister. Mother passed 2 years ago." Samuel stared at the photo attached to the file, Grace smiling gently beside a small child. He tapped the photo lightly. "She didn't deserve that," he muttered. His assistant raised an eyebrow. "Do you want me to do something?" Samuel looked up. "Yes, but not yet. Let's watch a little more." Diana Sterling stood in front of a mirror inside her luxury penthouse, adjusting her gold necklace. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from fans, stylists, and brand partners. She was one of the city's most followed fashion influencers and daughter of a real estate mogul. She smiled at her reflection, proud and perfect. "That girl was standing too close to the road," she said, sipping her green smoothie. "She should be grateful I didn't drive over her toes." Her assistant Rachel gave a nervous chuckle. "Yeah, sure." Diana never looked back. She believed life was about winners and losers, and she was born to win. But across town, Grace's day was dragging. Every time she bent down to mop or dust, her back ached. Still, she kept her chin up and whispered small prayers to herself. One more day, just get through today. Around noon, she went behind the building to eat her small lunch, a piece of bread and bottled water. She sat alone on a crate, her fingers trembling as she unwrapped the food. Then a man walked past the hotel entrance and stopped. It was Samuel, dressed casually, wearing a cap and sunglasses. He pretended to check his phone, but his eyes were on her. He saw how gently she ate, how she checked her phone for any missed call, probably from her sister. There was no makeup, no glamour, just a young woman who life kept pushing down, but who kept standing anyway. Samuel's chest tightened. He didn't know her, but something about Grace reminded him of his late mother. Strong, quiet, and never asking for help. He walked away slowly, but a plan was already forming in his mind. She doesn't know it yet, he thought, but her story is about to change. The next morning, Grace woke up early, as usual. She tied her sister Joy's shoelaces, packed her lunch, and kissed her forehead. "Be good at school, okay?" Joy nodded, smiling. "You too, Grace." Grace took the long bus ride to Grandview Towers, still wearing her backup uniform. The stains from yesterday's splash were still on her only good one, soaking in a bucket at home. When she arrived, something strange happened. Inside her locker was a small paper bag. Inside the bag was a pair of new gloves, a warm sandwich wrapped in foil, and a folded note. "For the girl who works with Grace even when the world is unkind." Grace blinked. She looked around, but no one seemed to notice. She opened the sandwich slowly. It was fresh, still warm. She hadn't had a hot breakfast in weeks. She didn't know who left it, but for the first time in a long while, she smiled. Far away in his office, Samuel looked through the hotel's internal camera feed, one he had legal access to thanks to a security partnership. He watched her reaction and nodded to himself. "Small steps," he whispered. Meanwhile, Diana was on a talk show, talking about her latest designer bag. The host praised her elegance, and she smiled for the cameras, like nothing in the world could touch her. But the moment the show ended, Diana snapped at her team. "My coffee was too cold. Fire the new girl." No one dared speak back. That was Diana's world, cold, sharp, and filled with masks. But things were changing. That evening, Samuel made another call. "I want her promoted," he said to the hotel's regional manager. "Find a way, quietly." The manager hesitated. "She's just a cleaner." Samuel's voice turned firm. "She's not just anything." Grace was sweeping the hotel's grand lobby when the head supervisor called her over. "Grace Okoro," he said, looking at a clipboard. She nodded, nervous. "You've been moved to VIP floor maintenance. Starts tomorrow. Better pay, less mess." Her eyes widened. "Sir, are you sure?" "I didn't apply." "It's been approved," he cut in. "Congratulations." She bowed slightly. "Thank you, sir." The moment she walked away, whispers began. VIP floor, for her. Did she charm someone? She must know someone high up. Grace heard it all but said nothing. She had no idea why her life was shifting, but deep down she felt a quiet joy. She shared the news with Joy later that evening, and her little sister hugged her tightly. "See? Good things can happen." Meanwhile, Samuel continued observing from the shadows. He visited the hotel more often now, always in disguise. He watched her kindness, her quiet strength, the way she treated every guest like royalty. Even though no one ever treated her that way, he admired her deeply, but still hadn't spoken to her properly. That same evening, Diana received a strange envelope at her office. Inside was a photograph, grainy but clear. It showed her car splashing mud on Grace. A sticky note was attached. "Not everyone forgets." Diana's eyes narrowed. "What kind of sick joke is this?" She tore the note and threw it away. But something in her chest tightened. For the first time, she didn't feel untouchable. Back at the hotel, Grace found another note in her locker. "Keep shining. The world sees you, even if people pretend not to." She stared at it, puzzled but moved. She didn't know who was behind the gifts, but something was happening, and deep inside, she hoped it was something good. Grace stepped carefully onto the VIP floor for the first time. The air smelled different. Fresh flowers, expensive polish. The carpets were softer, the walls quieter. She walked with her head low, trying not to draw attention. But her work was flawless. Every corner sparkled under her care. One guest watched her quietly from a nearby lounge chair. It was Samuel, again in casual clothes, hidden behind sunglasses and a newspaper. He observed how she worked, how she smiled politely, even to those who ignored her. He finally stood and approached. "Excuse me," he said, "do you know where the Cloud9 lounge is?" Grace turned and smiled gently. Yes, sir. I'll walk you there. As they moved, he asked, How long have you worked here? Almost 2 years, she replied. It's been tough, but it pays the bills. He nodded. Do you enjoy it? She hesitated. I don't know if anyone dreams of mopping floors, but I'm thankful. I try to do my best. He stopped walking. You do more than that, he said softly. You shine. Grace gave a small laugh. Thanks, I think. Samuel didn't reveal who he really was. He just watched her walk away, still smiling. Later that day, Diana sat across from her father in a high-end restaurant, her frustration barely hidden behind her flawless makeup. Someone's targeting me, she said, swirling her wine without drinking. First that photo, now people whispering online. It's like there's a campaign against me. Her father looked calm as he sipped his drink. Or maybe, he said, someone's just holding up a mirror. Diana's jaw tightened. Please, I haven't done anything wrong. But deep down, part of her knew, somewhere in her past, she had stepped on people without looking back. At the hotel, Grace found a small bouquet in her locker. No note, just flowers. She stared at them, confused yet deeply moved. Someone was watching her. But not to harm her, to help her. The more Grace rose, the more attention she drew. Some staff whispered in admiration, but others grew cold. Monica, a senior cleaner who'd worked at the hotel for 6 years, wasn't happy. She just got here and is already on the VIP floor. Must be doing something behind the scenes, she muttered to the others. Grace noticed the stares and silence whenever she entered a room. She tried to ignore it and kept doing her job with excellence. That day, Samuel returned to the hotel again. This time he asked for Grace's section specifically, claiming he trusted her touch. She was called to clean a private lounge. When she walked in, Samuel was sitting there. No cleaning needed, he said kindly. Just wanted to say thank you for your kindness the other day. Grace smiled politely. I was just doing my job, sir. He looked at her for a moment, then asked, If you could do anything, what would it be? Grace paused. I'd study hospitality management, maybe manage a place like this someday, but school costs money, and right now, life's about survival. Samuel nodded, storing every word. Later that night, Monica snuck into the supply room and switched Grace's cleaning solution with something slippery. The next morning, a guest slipped in the lobby. Who cleaned here last? The manager shouted. Grace was blamed. She was called into the office and warned. I swear I didn't do anything wrong, she said, her voice shaking. But no one listened, except one person, Samuel. He requested the hotel's CCTV footage be reviewed. What it showed shocked everyone. Monica had clearly swapped the chemicals. The manager apologized. Grace, I'm sorry, you're cleared. She left the office in tears, relieved but shaken. From a distance, Samuel watched. She doesn't even know I saved her, he thought, but I will one day. Diana scrolled through her social media and frowned. There it was, a blurry photo of her SUV with the caption, Some people think money erases manners. It had been reposted hundreds of times, and though her face wasn't visible, people were connecting the dots. Who's spreading this nonsense? She snapped at her assistant. Rachel hesitated. Maybe you should apologize. Diana laughed bitterly. To a street cleaner. I don't even remember her face. But her confidence had cracks now. Back at the hotel, Grace's name was cleared. The managers now greeted her with nods. Some staff even offered warm smiles. Monica was suspended for 2 weeks, and while Grace held no grudge, she kept her distance. That afternoon, Samuel returned, not in disguise this time. He walked up to Grace while she arranged flowers in the lobby. You again? She said with a playful smile. You really like this hotel. I like seeing things grow, he replied, his gaze steady. Grace tilted her head. You're not just a guest, are you? He chuckled. You're smart. He extended a hand. Samuel Wright, owner of Wright Estates. I'm part of the group that oversees this hotel. Grace froze. You're the Samuel Wright, the billionaire? I'm just Samuel, he said gently, and I've been watching. Not in a creepy way, he added quickly, grinning. Grace laughed nervously. I saw what happened to you that day. The car, the mud, and how you kept walking. Her smile faded slightly. You didn't deserve that, he continued, and I couldn't forget it. She looked at him, unsure what to say. You don't have to say anything, Samuel added. Just know I see you. Later that night, Grace walked home quietly, her heart racing. Not from fear, but from hope. For the first time in a long time, someone powerful saw her and treated her like she mattered. Grace couldn't sleep that night. Samuel Wright, the Samuel Wright, had spoken to her like an equal. Not like a boss, not like a rich man, but like someone who truly saw her heart. She wanted to believe it was real, but part of her feared it was all just kindness that would disappear with time. The next day, as she walked to work, a car slowed beside her. She looked up and froze. It was Diana. She rolled down the window and gave a thin smile. You're Grace, right? Grace stepped back slowly. Yes. You've caused quite the stir, Diana said, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Now people think I'm some villain. Grace's brows furrowed. I didn't do anything. Diana leaned closer. You didn't have to. Playing the victim works wonders. I never wanted pity, Grace said firmly. I just wanted to work in peace. Diana laughed. You think Samuel sees you? He's like all rich men. He'll get bored. Don't let attention fool you, sweetie. Then she drove off. Grace stood there, shaken but not broken. At the hotel, Samuel waited in the cafe. He had prepared something special. When Grace walked in later during her break, he waved her over. What's this? She asked, seeing a folder on the table. A scholarship, he said. Full hospitality training, paid for, starts next month. You'd still work here part-time if you want. Grace's hands trembled. Why me? Because you never asked for anything, he said softly, but you deserve everything. Tears filled her eyes. At that moment, Diana watched from a distance. Unseen, the mud she splashed wasn't just water. It had started something unstoppable. And now the girl she mocked was rising higher than she ever imagined. Grace sat on the rooftop garden of the hotel, holding the scholarship letter in her hands. The city lights twinkled below her, but her heart was brighter. She thought of her late mother and the struggles that led her here. All the nights she cried silently, all the days she worked through pain, it all felt worth it now. Samuel joined her, 2 cups of hot cocoa in hand. You're quiet, he said, offering one. I'm just overwhelmed, she replied. Is this really happening? He nodded. You earned this, Grace, every piece of it. She smiled gently. I used to think people like you didn't see people like me. I didn't always, Samuel admitted, but watching you reminded me of my own mother. She was a cleaner too, raised me alone, never complained. You have that same strength. Grace looked at him in surprise. You never talk about her. Because people expect me to act like I built myself alone, he said. But truth is, women like you are the ones who build everything. The next day, the hotel announced Grace's scholarship during their monthly staff meeting. A small standing ovation followed. Even those who once whispered now clapped. Grace's quiet strength had earned respect. But not everyone was clapping. Diana stormed into her father's office, heels clicking against the marble floor, her designer outfit flawless. But her face was tight with frustration. Why is everyone talking about her? She snapped. She's just a cleaner. Samuel barely looked at me for years, and now he's handing her scholarships like she's royalty. Her father looked up slowly, setting his pen down. His tone was calm but cutting. Because she earned it, Diana. The respect, the recognition, all of it. And you, he paused, meeting her eyes. You still have a lot of growing up to do. For the first time, Diana had nothing to say. That evening, Samuel walked Grace home under the soft streetlights. The road was quiet, and they talked and laughed gently as they walked side by side. When they reached her building, the front door opened with a creak. A little girl stepped out with a big smile. Joy, Grace said happily, why are you out here? I heard you laughing, Joy said, running into her sister's arms. Then she looked up at Samuel. Is he your friend? Samuel bent down a little and smiled. Hi, Joy, I've heard a lot about you. Grace held her sister close. She's my everything, she said softly. Samuel looked at them, 2 sisters standing strong together. It touched something deep inside him. After a while, Joy went back inside, and Grace walked Samuel to the gate. They stood there in the soft light. Samuel looked at her with a quiet smile. "Grace," he said, "this all started with mud. But maybe it ends with something beautiful." Grace's heart beat faster. She looked up at him, her eyes full of feeling. "Maybe," she whispered, "it's just the beginning." Grace's story began to spread beyond the hotel. A local blog picked it up. From Mud to Merit, the cleaner who inspired a billionaire. It went viral overnight. People left comments like, "This is what kindness looks like. She deserves the world." Finally, a real Cinderella story. Grace was shocked. She hadn't asked for fame, only a chance, but now people everywhere were watching her journey. At the hotel, she carried herself with more confidence. Her steps were still quiet, but they were sure. She'd started evening classes and was already impressing her lecturers. Samuel visited often, always offering support from a respectful distance. But everyone could see it now. He was falling for her. Diana couldn't stand it. She paid a shady blogger to post fake news. That Grace was dating Samuel for his money, that she planned it all from the beginning. The article spread like fire. Grace saw it during her lunch break and felt her heart sink. Staff began whispering again. A few even gave her cold looks. She packed her things and left early. But Samuel wasn't silent this time. He called a press meeting the next day. Standing in front of flashing cameras, he said clearly, "Grace Okoro is not a gold digger. She is the most hardworking, honest woman I've ever met. Anyone who believes otherwise should question what they value. Money or heart?" The crowd clapped. Grace, watching from her tiny apartment, covered her mouth, stunned. Later that evening, a delivery arrived at her door. A single red rose and a note. "Let the world whisper. I'll always speak your truth. Samuel." Tears welled up in her eyes. She wasn't just being seen, she was being chosen. The scholarship, the promotion, the public support. It all felt like a dream Grace never dared to dream. But with every passing day, it became her new reality. At school, she was thriving. Her teachers praised her discipline and drive. At work, the hotel manager began asking for her ideas. She was no longer just the cleaner. She was someone whose voice mattered. Meanwhile, Diana's world crumbled. The fake blog post was traced back to her. Her father was furious. "You didn't just hurt her, you embarrassed us all." He froze her accounts and suspended her from the company's board. "Maybe when you learn respect, we'll talk," he said coldly. Diana stood speechless. No credit cards, no personal assistant, no designer gifts. Just silence. Back at the hotel, Samuel invited Grace for dinner, not as a boss, not as a sponsor, but as a man who admired her heart. He picked her up himself in a modest car this time. No guards or drivers. They ate on the rooftop of a quiet bistro overlooking the city. "You changed me, Grace," he said. "You reminded me of what matters." Grace looked down, blushing. "I still don't know why you picked me." Samuel reached across the table. "Because in a world full of noise, your silence spoke the loudest. And I heard you." They sat in peace, the kind that doesn't need music to feel magical. As they walked home hand in hand, Samuel stopped at the spot where it all began. "This was where she splashed you," he said. "But look at you now." Grace smiled. "She splashed mud on me, but you planted a seed." He nodded. "And now you're blooming." Neither of them said more. The night didn't need more words, because love when real speaks best in quiet moments. 1 year later, Grandview Towers held a special gala to celebrate its 20th anniversary. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers. Live music played softly, and the entire city's elite attended. Grace walked in wearing a simple sky blue gown. She didn't have diamonds or a designer label, but she didn't need them. Her posture, her grace, and her smile were enough. Guests turned to look. Some whispered. Some clapped softly. She wasn't a cleaner tonight. She was the guest of honor. Samuel stood beside her, beaming with pride. He hadn't proposed yet, but everyone could see it in his eyes. He was hers, completely. Grace was called on stage. The hotel director handed her a plaque for strength, humility, and the spirit that lifted us all. She took a deep breath and stepped up to the mic. "A year ago, I was just a girl walking to work in worn-out shoes. and mud on my clothes. I was invisible, until one act of cruelty and one act of kindness changed my life. The room fell silent. I don't stand here because I'm lucky. I stand here because I kept going. Because someone believed in me before I could believe in myself. She looked over at Samuel, and because kindness is louder than status. Tears sparkled in a few eyes, even the hotel staff at the back stood straighter. Later that night, as the gala ended, Grace returned to the spot where the journey began, where the SUV splashed mud on her. The road had been repaved, smooth, clean. She took off her heels and walked barefoot across it. Samuel watched, smiling. "What are you doing?" he asked. Grace paused, looking down at the place that had once humiliated her. "Leaving the last trace of who I used to be," she said, "and stepping fully into who I am now." Without a word, Samuel took off his shoes and joined her, barefoot beside her, equal, proud. Together they walked forward, slowly, silently, not just as two people in love, but as something more, proof that even when life throws mud, a flower can bloom, and sometimes it blooms so brightly, the whole world stops to notice. The end. If you loved this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel for more captivating stories like this one. It had been 1 year since the mud, since the splash, the shame, and the stranger who changed everything. Grace Okoro had risen from silence to success. She was no longer just the cleaner, but a hospitality student by day and a respected VIP staff member by night. People now spoke her name with admiration, not pity, but just as peace began to settle, the past came knocking, with angry eyes and unfinished business. On a breezy Wednesday morning, Grace stood in her kitchen, humming softly as she packed Joy's school lunch. Her little sister, now in Basic 4, danced barefoot to the music playing from an old radio. "Toast or pancakes?" Grace asked, waving a spatula. "Toast," Joy cheered. "I have to read a poem today. I want toast energy." Grace smiled and kissed her forehead. "Toast energy it is." They laughed just like every other morning in their small apartment. Modest, but full of peace, the kind of peace Grace had prayed for. Meanwhile, across the city, a pair of tired, angry eyes stared at a printed photo on a worn-out table. A photo from the newspaper. The headline read, "From Mud to Bloom. Billionaire's Muse Shares Her Journey." The man holding it had a torn shirt, a scar over one eyebrow, and shaking fingers. Peter Okoro, her father. He hadn't come when her mother was sick. He hadn't come when she died. He hadn't come when his daughter begged for help. But now he had seen the paper, and the paper said she was dating a billionaire. He crumpled the page and stood up. "So my little girl thinks she doesn't need her father anymore," he muttered, pacing the room. "Let's see if money taught her manners." He grabbed his jacket and left, slamming the door behind him. Back in her apartment, Grace gave Joy a goodbye hug. "Go show them what toast energy can do," she whispered. Joy giggled and ran off. Grace turned back inside, unaware that this peaceful morning would be her last for a while. Because outside, walking slowly, watching her door, was the man she never wanted to see again. The storm was coming, and it carried her past on its shoulders. The day was long but peaceful. Grace finished her hotel shift with ease. The guests smiled at her. Her supervisor nodded in quiet approval. Even the flower vendor by the lobby handed her a rose. Just because. Grace walked home with a smile and light steps. Her day had been good. The sun was setting and the breeze felt soft on her skin. But then she saw him, standing by the gate of her apartment building, leaning against a rusty pole like he belonged there. Her heart stopped. His hair was thinner, his face looked older, but those eyes, the cold, sharp ones, she could never forget. "Grace," the man said with a half smile, "it's really you." Grace froze, then slowly gripped the strap of her bag. "What are you doing here?" Peter Okoro took a step forward. "I came to see my daughters." Grace didn't move. Her voice was cold. "I don't have a father." He flinched, then gave a short, dry laugh. "So that's how you speak to your own father now?" "You're not my father," she said. "You gave up that right." He waved her off. "Come on, family is family." I heard you're doing well now, dating a billionaire, getting awards, showing up in magazines. That's big. You should be proud. Don't call me family. Her voice shook. When Mum was sick, I called you every night. You never picked up. She died with a broken heart. Peter looked down, but she didn't stop. She believed in you. Even when we ate soaked Gary for dinner, she'd say, "Your father will come back." And I hated her for that. Because you never did. His face hardened. After she died, I had no time to cry. I had to take care of Joy. I worked so hard, my fingers bled. She didn't know her dad, only me, and I promised myself she'd never feel abandoned like I did. He clenched his jaw. So now you think you're better than me? Grace's voice dropped. I don't think about you at all. You're just a ghost from my past. His eyes flashed. You think just because you're with a rich man, you're untouchable now. Don't forget who gave you life. She stepped back, calm but sharp. You didn't give me life, you gave me scars, and I'm done living with them. Just then, a strong hand rested on Grace's shoulder. Samuel. He stood behind Grace, calm but firm. Is there a problem here? Samuel asked. Peter barked. This is family business. Grace stepped in. Number family is someone who stays. You left. Peter stepped forward again, but Samuel didn't move. His voice was low but powerful. Walk away. Peter looked at Samuel, then at Grace. His eyes burned with anger. This isn't over, he muttered. Then he turned and stormed off. Grace stood there, shaking slightly, her heart racing. Samuel gently held her hand. Are you okay? She gave a small nod, but deep down she knew he would come back, and next time he wouldn't come alone. Outside a rundown bar, Peter Okoro lit a cigarette, rage tightening every line on his face. He felt humiliated. First, his own daughter had thrown his past in his face, and now some shiny rich man had the nerve to protect her like she was royalty. But Peter wasn't a fool. He knew how the world worked. Respect wasn't given, it was taken, and if Grace wanted to pretend she was above him now, he'd remind her. Mud always finds its way back to the surface. That night he made a call, not to an old friend, to an old enemy. Diana Sterling sat in the VIP lounge of a rooftop bar, sipping from a crystal flute while ignoring the stares from half the room. She had been laying low ever since her mud splash scandal went viral last year. It had almost cost her everything, brand deals, her father's trust, her social standing, and all because of Grace Okoro. She scrolled through her phone, pausing on a headline, Cleaner-turned-star student, Grace Okoro shines at hospitality gala. Her lips curled. She's still riding that wave, she muttered. Then a message popped up, unknown number. You hate her, I want her gone, let's talk. Diana's eyebrows lifted. She typed, Who is this? Reply, her father. Her fingers hovered for a moment, then she smiled. The next day, at a quiet corner of the city, Peter and Diana met. He looked rough. She looked flawless. But her smile was sharp. You must be desperate, she said, sipping her coffee. You know who I am, and still called me. I don't need friends, Peter growled. I need people who want Grace out of the picture. Diana raised an eyebrow. Why now? He leaned forward. Because she rejected me like I was dirt, and that billionaire, Samuel, thinks he can erase me. I want her to know what it feels like, to be left with nothing. Diana studied him for a moment, then she smirked. You're in luck, she said. I've been waiting for the perfect excuse to ruin her. He narrowed his eyes. So what's your plan? Diana leaned in. Simple, she whispered. We don't touch her. We touch her reputation, her name, her peace. We make her think the world that lifted her is about to throw her back down. Peter grinned, and just like that, two broken storms joined forces, ready to make the girl who bloomed from mud wilt again. The ballroom sparkled like a dream. Grace stood near the grand staircase of Grandview Towers, wearing a soft peach dress that swayed gently around her ankles. Her hair was pulled into a simple bun, and her smile was calm, grateful, not showy. The event was in her honor, a fundraiser celebrating rising stars in hospitality. And tonight Grace Okoro was the face of the future. Samuel stood beside her holding a single red rose. For you, he whispered. Grace's cheeks flushed. She took the flower with both hands and looked at him with quiet wonder. "You always know how to make a moment feel like a story." He smiled. "You are a story, one that's just getting started." Flashbulbs clicked as a few journalists snapped photos. Bloggers whispered, "Is that her?" The cleaner who became a hospitality scholar. "She's beautiful. Samuel Wright's got taste." For once, Grace didn't feel out of place in a rich room. She had earned her presence. But while the city clapped, someone was already plotting the next chapter. The very next morning, as Grace stood at a roadside stall picking plantains for Joy's lunch, her phone buzzed again and again. Dozens of messages, missed calls, news alerts. She unlocked the screen and froze. Headline, "Cleaner's father speaks. My daughter cut me off after I raised her." Subheadline, "Grace Okoro's billionaire fairy tale isn't what it seems." A photo of Peter Okoro appeared, sitting in a cafe, his face sad and wounded. Beneath it, a quote. "She changed. Money changed her. I was there before the fame, but now I'm nothing to her." Grace's breath caught, the world around her blurred, more messages poured in. "Grace is trending. Do you have a statement? Did you really abandon your own father?" Her hands shook. The bag of plantains slipped from her fingers and hit the ground. She turned and walked away, fast, fighting the tears stinging her eyes. At his downtown office, Samuel slammed his tablet down on the desk. "Who approved this story?" he barked. His assistant flinched. It was a blogger, unverified source. It spread overnight. "Find out who paid him," Samuel snapped. "Now." Meanwhile, in a high-rise apartment, Diana smirked as she poured herself a drink. "Let the fall begin," she whispered. Peter stood near the window, arms crossed. "That's just the first hit." Diana turned to him. "Trust me, her real pain hasn't even started." Back in her apartment, Grace sat on the floor in silence, the weight of it all pressing down. Her phone buzzed again, this time just one message. From Samuel. "I'm here. I believe you. And we're going to fight this. Together." Grace closed her eyes as tears slid down her cheeks. She had bloomed once, but now the mud was rising again. And this time, it was personal. The storm didn't pass. It spread. By morning, the story had leapt from gossip blogs to mainstream headlines. Grace's name was now tied to ungrateful daughter, the truth behind Grace Okoro. From rags to riches, but at what cost? Worst of all, they used her photos from the gala, smiling, holding Samuel's hand, clutching the rose, now twisted to look like a performance. Inside Wright Estate's headquarters, tension thickened the air. A long conference table stretched across the room. Around it sat board members, investors, and executives in tailored suits. Samuel stood at the head, face calm but unreadable. "Her past has nothing to do with our business," he said firmly. One older man cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Samuel, we're not just protecting stock. We're protecting image, your image." Another woman added, "She's linked to you in every article. This affects perception." A third chimed in. "Our luxury brand is built on exclusivity, cleaners, scandals, family drama. It doesn't sell elegance." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Are you suggesting I walk away from her to satisfy optics?" Silence, then a sigh. "We're suggesting caution." Later that evening, Samuel sat alone in his office, staring out the window. He didn't care about status, but he knew how easily public pressure could shift power. He had worked hard to build Wright Estates. He didn't want Grace to be caught in the crossfire of the world he belonged to. His assistant walked in quietly. "Sir, the source of the blog leak was traced." Samuel turned. It came from a burner account funded by Diana Sterling. Samuel's eyes narrowed. "Of course. And Peter Okoro was seen meeting her 2 days ago." A cold anger rose in Samuel's chest. They weren't just attacking Grace's name. They were building a war around it. Rain tapped softly against the windows as Grace folded Joy's laundry, trying to ignore the ache in her chest. Her phone had stopped ringing, but not because the storm was over, because people had moved on, to whisper behind her back instead. She thought of the blog posts, the boardroom whispers, the way one man, her own father, could smear everything she had fought so hard to build. She tucked the last of Joy's socks into the drawer and reached for her school bag to clean it out. As she unzipped the side pocket, a folded letter fell to the floor. Her heart stilled as she picked it up. Maplewood School. Parental notice. Dear Parent Guardian, we regret to inform you that Joy Okoro has been facing verbal bullying from a few pupils regarding her sister's recent media attention. We are taking steps to resolve the matter, but we recommend a brief meeting with the class teacher. Grace's hands shook. She pressed the paper to her chest and closed her eyes. Not Joy, not her little sister. The one she protected like a lioness, the one she shielded from pain by carrying all of it on her own back. She sat down, staring at the paper until the words blurred. Then, like a ghost, she rose and walked out into the night. An hour later, she sat across from Samuel at a quiet restaurant. He took one look at her face and knew. What happened? He asked gently. Grace passed him the letter, her voice cracked. She's being bullied, because of me. He read it in silence, then he reached across the table and took her hand. Grace, he said softly, this is not your fault. You've carried the world. Let me carry this with you. Tears welled in her eyes. I just wanted her to have a normal life. Samuel leaned in closer. She will, I promise. They sat there for a moment, hands locked, while the world outside spun with noise. Inside, a quiet bond held them steady. Diana sat in her high-rise apartment, scrolling through her phone with a glass of wine in hand. Her lips curled as she read the latest comments about Grace online. She's falling apart, she whispered, pleased. The headlines, the gossip, the judgment. It was all going exactly as planned. She stood and walked to the window, city lights glowing beneath her. Perfect, she murmured. Now let's see how far she falls. It was a Thursday afternoon, hot, dusty, and too quiet. Grace had left work early to pick Joy from school. She didn't want her sister walking home alone anymore. Not after that letter. Her heart had not rested since. She stood beneath the mango tree just outside the school gate, her arms crossed, her eyes scanning every face. Then she saw her. Joy came skipping toward her, smiling wide. Grace! Grace bent down, arms open. Joy ran into them. Did anyone bother you today? Grace whispered. Nope, I just ignored them like you said. Grace kissed her forehead. That's my brave girl. But just as they turned to walk home, a voice rang out behind them. Grace. Her heart dropped. She turned. Peter Okoro stood by the school fence, holding a small pink gift bag. What are you doing here? She asked, stepping protectively in front of Joy. I came to see my daughter. Grace's face hardened. She's not your anything. Peter took a step forward. She's my blood. Grace's voice rose. You don't get to show up at her school like this. You think a toy makes up for the years you abandoned us. I'm trying to reconnect, he shouted, anger rising. Why are you poisoning her against me? Joy clung to Grace's dress, confused and scared. You are the poison, Grace spat. You only came back when you thought I had something to offer. Peter's hand tightened around the gift bag. You ungrateful little Security guards from the school rushed forward. Sir, you need to leave now. Peter growled. You think you're a queen now, huh? Because of that billionaire? You'll see. One day you'll come crawling. Grace didn't flinch. I'd rather crawl alone, she said coldly, than let the man who left us walk beside me. Peter was escorted away, muttering curses. Joy's eyes were wide. Who was that man? Grace crouched, pulling her close. Just someone who lost the right to call us his daughters. They walked home slowly, no words, just the echo of broken ties and a child's quiet heart trying to understand. But Grace didn't cry. She was too tired for tears, too strong for fear. The next morning, Grace stayed home. She couldn't face the stares at the hotel. Not today. Not after what happened at Joy's school. She needed one day to breathe, to gather herself, to remind her heart it hadn't shattered, just bent. She stood by the window watching raindrops gather and race each other down the glass. Then her phone buzzed. One notification, then 5, then 10. She opened her messages and her entire world tilted, breaking. Grace Okoro's tragic secret. Father reveals her mother was an escort. The shame she tried to bury now threatens her billionaire fairy tale. There were quotes, lies, accusations, words like illegitimate, scandal, and manipulative. The article was venom, and her father had poured every drop. Her legs gave out. She sank to the floor, gasping for air. Joy rushed from the kitchen. "Grace, Grace." Grace couldn't speak. Her hands shook, her chest heaved. The pain wasn't just in the article, it was in the betrayal. He had gone too far. Hours later, Samuel found her still sitting on the floor. The article opened beside her. He knelt silently and pulled her into his arms. "I should have seen this coming," she whispered. "I should have known he would do anything." Samuel clenched his jaw. This is evil." She pulled back slowly. "I think I need to end this." Samuel frowned. "End what?" Grace wiped her eyes. "Us." His face froze. She looked down. "The more I rise, the more they try to pull me down. Now Joy's suffering. You're under pressure. The board is watching. Maybe it's easier if I disappear." Samuel shook his head. "Don't say that. Don't even think it." Tears ran down her cheeks. "I didn't ask for this attention. I just wanted peace." Samuel took her hand. "You are not a scandal. You are strength, and I won't let the world rewrite your story." She looked into his eyes, searching for doubt. There was none. Only fire. Only love. But far away, in Diana's luxury suite, she scrolled through the chaos online and smiled. "She's cracking," she said. Peter sat with a drink in hand. "She'll break soon." Diana raised her glass. "To the fall of Cinderella." But outside their glass tower of lies, something was rising in silence. Grace's resolve and the truth. The lights were harsh. The cameras were many. Samuel Wright stood at the podium, dressed in a simple black suit, his expression unreadable. Behind him a banner read, "Wright Estates, Press Briefing." But this wasn't about real estate. This was about Grace. The room was packed. Journalists leaned forward, pens ready. Social media live streams were rolling. Headlines were waiting to be written. Samuel adjusted the mic and spoke. "No business should be forced to defend a woman's dignity." A murmur rippled through the room. "But today I'm not speaking as a CEO. I'm speaking as a man who has watched someone fight harder than anyone should ever have to." Grace Okoro is not a liar. She is not a manipulator. She is not ashamed of where she came from, and neither am I. Cameras clicked furiously. She worked when others mocked. She rose when others doubted. And while the world judged her for walking through mud, they forgot something important. He looked straight into the camera. "Mud grows flowers." Silence. Then a wave of applause. Not forced, not polite. Real. Samuel's voice lowered. "The people spreading lies about her, some of them even related to her, should be ashamed. You abandoned her. She didn't abandon you." The message was clear. Director, Peter, Diana. Both called out without a single name mentioned. "I stand by Grace, not because of what she looks like or where she works, but because of who she is." He stepped back. The press exploded with questions, but Samuel walked away, his message delivered. Grace sat in her tiny apartment, Joy beside her, eyes wide as the live stream ended. Her hands covered her mouth. The man the world called cold, ruthless, unreachable, had just stood up for her in front of the whole country, and not as her savior, but as someone who saw her. Diana stood by the window staring at her phone. Her jaw was tight with frustration. "He just made her untouchable," she whispered. Peter slammed his glass on the table. "This isn't over," he growled. "If we can't ruin her in public, we'll ruin her in private." Diana turned to him slowly. Maybe we should stop, Peter. This is going too far." But Peter shook his head, eyes burning with anger. "Number, I won't stop until her life is in pieces. She chose that billionaire over her own father. She deserves what's coming." Diana felt a cold ache in her chest. For the first time she truly saw Peter, not just as a hurt man, but a bitter one. A man so angry he'd destroy his own daughter. And deep inside, Diana wished she had never let herself be part of this. It was Sunday morning. The sky was clear, but Grace's thoughts were cloudy. She had barely slept. The press conference had gone viral. She just wanted a normal day, a quiet breakfast, a walk with Joy. But what she got was Diana Sterling at her doorstep. A soft knock. Grace opened the door halfway and froze. Diana stood there in a white blazer, designer sunglasses on her head, holding a brown envelope, no cameras, no entourage. Just her. "What do you want?" Grace asked coldly. Diana sighed. "I'm not here to fight." Grace raised an eyebrow. "I just came to say, I'm sorry." Grace blinked. "Sorry? For splashing mud on me? For mocking me? Or for teaming up with my father to destroy my life?" Diana stepped back a little. Guilt showed on her face. "I was mean to you," she said quietly. "Back then it felt good to laugh at someone who couldn't fight back. I didn't care how it made you feel. But now—" She looked away, her voice shaking slightly. "Now I understand what I did." Grace didn't move. Diana continued. "I joined your father to hurt you, but his hatred, it's deeper than I ever imagined. It's not just anger, it's cruel. And I came here to warn you. Please be careful." Grace's eyes softened just for a moment, but her voice stayed calm and guarded. "Why are you really here?" Diana held out the brown envelope. "This is proof. Everything your father and I planned. He wanted to release more lies. But I stopped. I walked away. Take this. Do whatever you want with it." Grace took the envelope slowly. "Why are you giving this to me?" Diana swallowed. "Because I'm tired of being the villain, and because someone once told me mud can grow flowers. I want to see if it can clean people too." She turned and walked away, heels clicking softly down the hallway. Grace stood there, stunned. Inside the envelope, emails, screenshots, audio files, every dirty plot, a map of betrayal, signed by her own blood. That night, Grace sat at the dining table with Samuel. She told him everything, what Diana said, what was in the envelope, all of it. When she finished, Samuel looked at her with pride in his eyes. "You just took your power back." Grace shook her head gently. "No, I'm not going to use it to hurt him." Samuel leaned in, curious. "So what will you do?" Grace looked at him. His calm, steady presence gave her strength. "I'll use it to protect what matters," she said softly. Because Grace wasn't looking for revenge. She was searching for peace. The next day, the sun was shining brightly. The school gates were wide open. Children laughed and ran to meet their waiting parents. But Grace was running late. Joy was already waiting at the school gate, looking around for her sister to come pick her up. She had just come from a meeting with scholarship donors, finally getting the chance to speak to the board about growing the hospitality program. It was a moment she had worked hard for, but now time wasn't on her side. She texted the school, "Running late, please keep Joy safe until I arrive. Grace Okoro." But the message came too late. Peter Okoro stood just outside the school fence, holding a shiny pink gift box and a wide, practiced smile. He looked clean-shaven, wore a new shirt, and had a friendly glint in his eye. "Joy," he called out sweetly, waving the gift. The little girl turned and squinted. "You're the man from last time." He nodded. "That's right, I'm your daddy." She hesitated. "Grace said you're not family." Peter chuckled. "That's because she's upset. But guess what? Today's your birthday surprise." Joy blinked. "It's not my birthday." "It is now," he grinned. "Come on, I've got cake, toys, and a big surprise waiting, just for you." Joy bit her lip. She looked back at the school building. Peter leaned down. "Just a quick ride. We'll be back before Grace even knows. Don't you want a real gift for once?" The gift box sparkled. The girl hesitated. Then slowly, she followed him. Grace arrived 20 minutes later, breathless. "Sorry I'm late," she told the school secretary. "I'm here for Joy." The woman frowned. "She left already." Grace froze. "What?" "She said her daddy came for her." Grace's heart dropped. "Call security now." Across town, Peter pulled into a warehouse district, the kind of place where no child belonged. He opened the car door. "We're not getting cake?" Joy asked quietly. Peter turned slowly. His face was no longer kind. "No," he said coldly. "You're going to help me teach your sister a lesson." Grace called Samuel, who activated his private security team. Within minutes, every traffic camera near the school was being reviewed. The car, the direction, the plates. They traced Peter's route like a bloodhound following a scent. And they found him. He was just about to pull Joy from the car when black SUVs screeched into the lot. Guards poured out. Peter backed away, panicked. "Stay back!" But it was too late. He was tackled, cuffed, and pulled to the ground. Joy ran to the arms of a security guard, crying. Grace arrived minutes later, her body shaking. She fell to her knees and wrapped her arms around Joy, sobbing into her hair. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." "I was scared," Joy whispered. "He lied to me." Grace held her tighter. "He'll never hurt you again." Later, Peter sat behind bars, charged not only for attempted kidnapping, but also for blackmail, conspiracy, and defamation. Diana's signed confession and the documents Grace had been given sealed the case. He would not walk free again. Not this time. And Grace? She returned home that night with Joy sleeping on her shoulder and Samuel holding her hand. No more fear. No more ghosts. Just the sound of healing. The prison was quiet. Grey walls, cold steel, the smell of regret in the air. Peter Okoro sat alone in a small visitation room, eyes fixed on the table in front of him. No visitors, no calls, no reporters. Just silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than chains. His lawyer had tried everything, but the evidence was airtight. Attempted abduction, blackmail, public defamation. Diana's signed statement sealed his fate. She had confessed everything, after Samuel promised her immunity in exchange for the truth. Peter thought Grace might visit, but she never did. Not out of hatred. Out of healing. She had let go. Back in the city, life had moved forward. Without him. Grace stood in front of a packed auditorium at the National Women in Leadership Conference, holding a microphone with both hands. A banner behind her read, "From Cleaner to Leader, Grace Okoro shares her story." The crowd was silent as she spoke. "1 year ago, I was scrubbing hotel floors in silence. Today, I help design guest experience models. But I didn't climb here because someone handed me a ladder." She paused, her voice calm but powerful. "I climbed because I refused to let pain be my identity." Applause. Joy sat in the front row, beaming. Samuel sat beside her, smiling with quiet pride. Grace's eyes glistened as she continued, "Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you become the ones who hurt you the most. But healing doesn't always come from punishment. It comes from choosing peace over revenge." She looked down at her sister, and from protecting what truly matters. That night, Grace stood barefoot on the rooftop of their apartment, the city lights blinking like stars below. She breathed in the cool night air, her heart finally light. Not because everything was perfect, but because she was free. Free from the past. Free from fear. Footsteps approached behind her. Samuel, he didn't speak at first, just stood beside her watching the sky. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Grace turned and gasped. He opened it slowly. Inside sat a delicate silver ring, crowned with a single teardrop diamond. Simple, quiet, and radiant, just like her. "I didn't fall in love with the girl who rose from mud," Samuel began, voice steady. "I fell in love with the woman who never stopped blooming, even when the world tried to bury her." Grace's eyes filled with tears. He knelt on one knee on that same rooftop where she once cried in silence. "Grace Okoro," he said, smiling gently, "will you marry me? Not as someone who saved you, but as someone who wants to walk beside you for the rest of his life." She nodded, overwhelmed, heart trembling. "Yes," she whispered, "1,000 times yes." He stood, slipping the ring onto her finger. And when he kissed her, the city seemed to pause, as if even the wind knew. This love was built on ashes, but it stood taller than fire. The end. If you loved this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel for more captivating stories like this one. It had been 3 months since Grace said yes to Samuel's proposal. Her world had blossomed into something she could barely recognize. Scholarship completed, a well-earned promotion to guest experience coordinator, and a future bound to the man who changed everything. Samuel Wright. The man who saw her before the world did, the man who believed in her even when her voice shook. Now she stood by his side, not in shadow, but in strength. Together they were building something beautiful, an initiative to train underprivileged youth in hospitality. Grace's idea, Samuel's support, a shared dream. One evening, after a long planning session, they sat on the balcony of Samuel's penthouse, watching the stars. "You always stare at the sky like it's telling you secrets," Samuel teased. Grace smiled. "It does. The sky reminds me, no matter how dark things get, morning always comes." He leaned over and kissed her temple. "Well, as long as you're by my side, I'll never fear the night." But the night was already coming. The boardroom was thick with tension, the air electric with anticipation. Samuel sat at the head of the table, his face pale but resolute. Contracts lay open in front of him. This deal could define the future. He reached for his pen, but his hand trembled. A sharp breath escaped him. Then silence. Before anyone could react, Samuel slumped forward, collapsing onto the polished table. Gasps filled the room. Chairs scraped back. Panic surged like a wave. Grace rushed into the hospital an hour later, still in her uniform, her heart pounding like a drum. Doctors moved quickly. Machines beeped. Samuel lay unconscious. The diagnosis? Stress-induced cardiac arrest. He had been pushing too hard, working long hours, ignoring warning signs. Grace stood outside the ICU, fists clenched, tears spilling down her cheeks. The man who carried her through storms now lay behind glass, still and pale. And suddenly, the empire they built was now in her hands. The boardroom never felt this cold. Grace stood at the end of the long table, facing a row of expressionless executives, men and women in tailored suits who once nodded politely at her. When Samuel was in the room, now he wasn't. Samuel was still unconscious, stable but silent. And his empire, it was trembling. Wright Estates had shareholders to please, contracts to uphold, and an ambitious rival company, Fairgate International, waiting like vultures to strike. The board chair adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Miss Okoro, thank you for being here," he said. Grace nodded. "As you know, Mr. Wright appointed you as co-director of the Hospitality Impact Project. However, with his sudden condition, we need someone to represent his stake." "I will," Grace said softly. A few raised eyebrows. One executive leaned forward. "Miss Okoro, with respect, you're not a trained executive. You have no corporate experience." Grace took a breath. Her voice shook, but her spine held firm. "I may not have experience in suits and spreadsheets, but I have experience in survival, in service, in leading when no one notices." Silence. Then she added, "And if you're worried about image, let me remind you this entire project was born from one image, a cleaner who rose. And the world still remembers that." That struck something, but not everyone was convinced. Outside the room, murmurs flew. Can she really lead? She was just the girl who used to mop our floors. But Grace walked out of that boardroom, heels echoing on marble back straight. She wasn't trying to be Samuel. She was stepping into her own light because the storm hadn't taken her down. It had handed her the wheel. The next morning, Grace arrived early to Wright Estates Training Center. She was met with whispers again, not from doubt this time, but from confusion. Why was she leading meetings? Why was her ID badge upgraded? Why did Samuel's office assistant now report to her? Grace ignored it all. She had no time to explain herself to people who only valued titles. She had a hospital file on her nightstand and a full project proposal in her bag. But what she wasn't prepared for was the person waiting inside the conference room. Diana Sterling, dressed modestly, no designer shades, no camera crew, just her. Grace stopped in the doorway, startled. "What are you doing here?" Diana rose slowly, her hands folded behind her. Her voice was calm, almost reverent. "You promised you wouldn't use those files to destroy me, and you kept your word." She paused, meeting Grace's eyes. "I came because that kind of grace deserves a debt repaid." Grace folded her arms. "You owe a lot of people." Diana nodded. "I know, but I'm here to help. For real this time. No sabotage, no cameras, just skills." Grace raised a brow. "I studied PR before I got lost in fame," Diana continued. "I know how to manage press, handle brand crises, and navigate boardroom perception. And let's be honest, Your face is everywhere right now. Half the city's watching to see if you fail." Grace didn't answer. Diana stepped forward. "Let me help protect what you and Samuel built, please." Grace searched her eyes, looking for deceit, ego, something familiar. But what she saw wasn't the Diana who once laughed behind tinted glass. It was someone broken, rebuilding. Grace gave a single nod. "Okay, but one lie, one stunt, and you're out." Diana smiled faintly. "Fair." And just like that, the girl from the mud and the girl who threw it sat at the same table. Because sometimes the best redemption starts with rebuilding what you once broke. Later that week, Grace stood by the glass elevator at Wright Estates, going over the final proposal for the youth training program. Her fingers were steady, but her mind was a battlefield. Samuel was still unconscious. His doctor said he might wake any day now, or not. Grace held on to hope, but hope had a way of whispering, not shouting. As she stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed. A text from Diana. "Be careful, just heard Fairgate is sending a team to our gala." Grace blinked. Fairgate at their gala. The annual Wright Estates gala was just 2 nights away. Originally planned by Samuel to announce a multi-million naira expansion of their hospitality school. Now it would be Grace's first public test as the acting face of the company. The elevator doors opened, and standing in the lobby were 2 men in grey suits. Slick, smiling, too polished to be guests. "Miss Okoro," one of them said, "beautiful morning. I'm Marcus from Fairgate International. This is my colleague, David. Mind if we have a word?" Grace gave a tight smile. "Actually, I do." Marcus chuckled. "We just wanted to express our admiration. You've done a stunning job keeping things afloat." "Really," David added. "But let's be honest, you're new to this world, and Wright Estates, it's a heavy crown for someone. With your background." Grace stepped forward, calm, clear. "You're right. I am new to this world," she said, "but I've survived harder worlds than yours, and I didn't do it in a suit. I did it in silence, with scars." Marcus's smile faded. Grace leaned in. "If you came here to scare me, you should have worn boots. Because I don't slip on polished floors. I learned to run in mud." She walked past them. Neither man spoke again, but their eyes followed her, calculating, waiting. Because now they knew this wasn't Samuel's empire anymore. Grace was the storm they didn't expect. The lights were soft, the wine flowed, and every guest shimmered in designer fabric. But one seat remained empty, Samuel's. It was the first time the Wright Estates gala was being held without him present. The room felt it, the board noticed it, and so did the press. Grace stood near the edge of the stage, wearing a royal blue gown. Simple, graceful, unforgettable. Her hair was tied in a low bun, a silver brooch clipped to her dress. Not for show, for strength. Diana stood a few steps behind her, now her head of PR for the event. She whispered, "You're trending already. Half the room is watching to see if you stumble." Grace's voice was steady. "Then let's give them something to remember." The music faded, the lights dimmed, and Grace stepped onto the stage. She paused, a beat, 2, then she began, "Good evening, everyone. My name is Grace Okoro. Not too long ago, I cleaned the floors of this building. Today, I help build what it stands for." Gasps, cameras flashed. She continued, "This isn't a fairy tale. I wasn't rescued by a prince. I was seen by a man who believed that dignity doesn't come from status. It comes from how you treat others." She looked directly into the crowd. "Tonight, we unveil the Hospitality Futures program, a scholarship and mentorship platform for youth across country. Because the next Grace Okoro shouldn't have to be discovered. She should be prepared." Thunderous applause, tears, cheering. Even the toughest investors gave nods of approval. But in the far back corner of the gala stood a shadow. David from Fairgate, arms folded. He turned to whisper into his phone. "She's not just holding the empire, she's expanding it." A pause, then he added darkly, "We'll need to change tactics." The morning after the gala, Grace sat on her balcony, a soft breeze brushing against her face as she cradled a warm cup of tea. The city was just waking. Inside, little Joy slept soundly, curled under a pale blanket, wrapped in the calm Grace had spent years learning how to give. Her phone buzzed on the table. Diana's name lit up the screen. Grace answered, her voice still husky from the night before. "Morning." "You broke the internet," Diana said, her tone light but proud. "Clips of your speech are everywhere. Even 2 European outlets ran headlines. They're calling it the rebirth of right estates." Grace let out a small, tired laugh. "That's good." She looked out at the horizon, trying to hold on to the rare moment of stillness. But then another vibration, her second message from an unknown number. "Not everyone clapped for you last night. Check your email." The warmth in her chest chilled instantly. Grace opened her inbox. Subject: urgent internal leak. She clicked. What she saw made her blood run cold. Attached were images, doctored but terrifyingly convincing. Edited photos showing fake wire transfers, falsified financial reports, and fabricated emails. Each file was crafted to make it look like Grace had been siphoning company funds. The names, logos, and signatures looked disturbingly real. It was calculated, professional, aimed to ruin her. Her hand trembled as she pushed back from the table. The mug beside her untouched. For a long second she couldn't move, just stared at the screen, the weight of it pressing down. Then she grabbed her phone and called the only person who had seen the vultures circling. "Diana," she whispered when the line connected, "I need you, now." 15 minutes later, Diana stepped onto the balcony, her heels clicking softly. She was still in her blazer from an early meeting, phone in hand, lips parted to speak. But the moment she saw Grace's face, the smile disappeared. "What happened?" she asked, her voice tightening as she stepped forward. Grace didn't answer. She just handed her the laptop. Diana took it, glanced at the screen, and froze. "They're trying to frame you," she said. This looks like an inside job." Grace stared into the distance. "They couldn't beat me publicly. Now they're planting weeds in the soil I grew from." Diana looked up. "What do you want to do?" Grace stood. "Trace it, quietly. I want to know who's behind this, not guesses, proof. And then—" Grace's voice was still. "Then we fight fire with roots. I won't burn. I'll grow through it." Diana nodded. "I'll call a friend in cyber forensics." Meanwhile, across town, David sat at a private club sipping espresso. A younger associate whispered, "The files have been sent. She'll crack soon." David smiled without joy. She won't know what hit her. But what he didn't know, Grace had survived worse than lies, and this time she wasn't alone. 3 days went by. 3 long, quiet days. The fake documents didn't appear online. But the warning stayed with Grace like a shadow. They had told her to step down quietly. Or they would. Release it. But Grace didn't break. She didn't run. She built. She met with Diana and a digital forensics expert in a quiet cafe outside town. No paparazzi, no assistants, just strategy. The expert, a soft-spoken woman named Amaka, handed Grace a tablet. These files were built using your old HR paperwork and an outdated signature scan from the hotel's archived system. They used real pieces of your life to make fake accusations look real. Grace exhaled. "Do we know who sent it?" Amaka nodded. "We traced the IP to a company device, Right Estates." Diana's eyes widened. "Someone inside?" Amaka scrolled. "Yes, but not who you think. The user profile matches one of the junior finance analysts, a man named Brian Sterling." Grace frowned. "I've never even spoken to him." Diana's lips tightened. "You don't have to. Someone paid him to do this." Amaka nodded again. "One more thing. The files were accessed by a third party before being sent to you, through a secure proxy address." Grace leaned in. "Fairgate." Amaka smiled faintly. "Bingo." The pieces snapped together like thunder. David hadn't just tried to rattle her, he planted a landmine and waited. Grace stood from the table, eyes clear. "No press, no drama. Let's gather every trace. When I move, I want it to be final." That evening, she walked into Right Estates with the same calm she used to wear when pushing cleaning carts down the VIP floor. Everyone thought the empire was Samuel's. But Grace, she was its roots, and she was done shrinking. Grace moved like a storm no one saw coming. By Monday morning, she had summoned a private meeting with the Wright Estate's Internal Ethics Committee. The members were surprised, but Grace had the authority. Samuel had once made sure of that. In the room sat only a few: Diana, the lead internal auditor, 2 legal officers, and Grace. Brian, the junior analyst who helped forge the false financial reports, walked in nervously. He didn't know why he was there. Yet Grace stood at the front, silent for a beat, then spoke. Over the last week, attempts have been made to fabricate documents tied to my name. The aim was to discredit me and cripple this project. She turned to the screen behind her. With one tap, a marker's digital trail came to life. Email headers, device IDs, login times, file creation timestamps, the IP addresses, the access logs, and finally, a full recording of Brian's screen. Caught exporting a fake ledger entry. Brian's face went pale. Grace turned to him. "Do you deny this?" I was just following instructions," he stammered. "It wasn't my plan. I was paid." Grace held up a hand. "By whom?" Brian hesitated. Then, "David Hassan, Fairgate International." The room fell into stunned silence. Diana leaned forward. "He bribed a Wright employee to destroy Grace's name and tank the hospitality program." The lead auditor stood slowly. "Miss Okoro, we'll begin disciplinary action immediately and report this to authorities. You have our full support." Grace simply nodded. "Thank you, and one more thing." She pulled out a sealed envelope. "A formal motion to end any pending partnership talks with Fairgate. We don't build with snakes." No one objected. As Brian was let out, Grace's eyes never flinched. Because this time, the trap wasn't for her. It was hers. The sun was setting behind the city skyline, casting golden light across the windows of City General Hospital. Grace sat beside Samuel's hospital bed, fingers gently stroking his palm. Machines beeped softly in the background, steady but slow, like a clock waiting for its cue. She had just come from the ethics committee meeting. Her voice was calm, her back was straight. But now, alone with him, she finally let her guard drop. She whispered, "They tried to take everything, Samuel. They tried to say I didn't belong." Again. She looked at his sleeping face. "But I remembered what you told me." She reached into her bag and brought out a small folded paper. The very first anonymous note she ever received at the hotel a year ago. "For the girl who works with Grace, even when the world is unkind." Grace smiled faintly. "That was you, wasn't it?" Just then his hand moved. Slight, barely noticeable, but it moved. Grace's breath caught. "Samuel?" His fingers twitched again, his eyelids fluttered. She pressed the nurse's call button, heart racing. "He's moving, he's waking up." Within moments, nurses and the attending doctor rushed in. Monitors beeped faster, clearer, and then Samuel's eyes slowly opened. They were unfocused at first, but then locked on the one face he had always searched for. "Grace," he croaked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She laughed through them. "You scared me." His voice was weak. "You held the empire?" She leaned in. "I didn't just hold it, I grew it." A faint smile touched his lips. "Knew you would." The doctor nodded. "He's stable. He needs rest. But he's back." Grace sat back down, holding his hand tighter than ever. The lion was awake again, but the world had already seen something more terrifying than power, a woman who didn't flinch when left alone in the jungle. 2 weeks later, the buzz around Wright Estates reached new heights. Grace Okoro had not only survived the smear campaign, she had dismantled it, exposed the mole, and expanded the hospitality program with new funding from international investors. And now she was about to do something Samuel had always wanted but never dared. A public town hall, not for billionaires, for the people, for hospitality workers, cleaners, kitchen staff, bellboys, those who made the industry breathe but were never given a voice. The press gathered in a large open courtyard. The banner above read, "Dignity of Service, a vision by Grace Okoro." Samuel was there, still recovering, sitting quietly in a wheelchair under the shade, dressed in light grey with a soft blanket over his knees. Diana sat beside him, now head of corporate responsibility. Her eyes gleamed with something she never used to know: humility. Grace stepped up to the mic. She wore a white blouse, navy trousers, and no jewelry. Her voice was clear, unshaken, not rehearsed. Real. 2 years ago, I scrubbed hotel floors and went home with blisters. I wasn't lazy, I wasn't invisible, but to the world, I didn't matter. She paused. Then someone saw me. But what if he hadn't? Would I still be down there? Would I still be silent? She looked out at the crowd, workers, youth, dreamers. I don't want the next Grace Okoro to wait for a miracle. I want her to walk into a system that already values her. She stepped back, letting her words breathe. The crowd rose in applause, not out of politeness, but because something deep had shifted. Not just in right estates, in the industry, in perception. Samuel's eyes welled with tears. He had always dreamed of changing the system. But Grace? She was the change. 2 days after the town hall, just as Grace's momentum was reaching its peak, an emergency call came through. Samuel's assistant burst into Grace's office. "We have a breach," he said, pale. "Investor files, bank records, internal correspondence. They were leaked online." Grace stood instantly. "From where?" "An off-site server. The breach happened through a third-party supplier tied to Fairgate's old contract." Grace's heart pounded. This wasn't about her anymore. They were coming for Samuel. She raced downstairs to the executive floor, where Samuel had just arrived for his first official meeting since the hospital. The moment their eyes met, she knew he already knew. He stood slowly, leaning slightly on a cane. "They're trying to break the foundation now," he said quietly. Grace pulled out her phone. "I'll call a press conference. We'll respond. Deny. Deflect." Samuel shook his head. "No, we don't defend shadows with more shadows." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Grace, you've led this empire with integrity. Don't let fear make you a mirror of them." She took a shaky breath. "Then what do we do?" Samuel turned to the board. "We open every file. We release the truth ourselves." Gasps rippled through the room. One executive said, "That's suicidal. It'll expose everything." Samuel smiled faintly. "Not if we have nothing to hide." Grace nodded slowly. Truth was painful, but it was also invincible. Later that evening, Wright Estates released a full transparency report to the public. Every past transaction, donor file, and staff audit. Samuel stood beside Grace in the live stream. "We built this company on trust," he said, "so we're choosing to keep it clean, even if the cost is high." And to their surprise, the cost wasn't loss, it was loyalty. Investors praised the move. Former critics called it courageous. And Fairgate, they tried one more stunt. But no one cared anymore, because when your house is made of truth, lies can't break the windows. One evening, Grace and Samuel sat beneath the courtyard tree as the sun slipped behind the rooftops, and birds sang overhead. "I never imagined peace would feel like this," Grace said, sipping her juice. Samuel leaned in with a smile. "You made it happen." She shook her head gently. "No, we did." He took her hand, now adorned with the ring that once felt like a dream. "What's next?" he asked. Grace smiled. "We teach, we raise leaders, we stay rooted." "And your father?" Grace's smile dimmed, but her voice stayed calm. "Still in prison. But I pray for him." Samuel watched her in awe. "How do you hold so much pain and still bloom?" Grace looked at the tree above them. "Because pain taught me where the light is." Samuel held her gaze. "You've forgiven the world, Grace, but have you forgiven him?" She was quiet for a long moment, then she stood. "I think it's time I tried." It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. No cameras, no headlines. Just the hum of tires against gravel, as a black car pulled up to the Federal Correctional Center on the outskirts of town. Grace stepped out, holding tightly to Joy's hand. The little girl wore a yellow cardigan, her eyes wide but calm. She didn't know everything, but she knew they were here for someone who once hurt her sister, and who once tried to take her. Grace took a breath. The sun was warm, but her palms were cold. Inside the visitors' hall, Peter Okoro sat in a grey uniform, head bowed, hands folded. He looked smaller now, thinner, quieter. Time had stripped him of pride, of rage. When Grace walked in, he didn't lift his head. Not at first, but when he saw Joy beside her, his eyes welled up. Slowly, shakily, he stood. "Grace," he said barely above a whisper, "you came." She sat across from him, Joy beside her. "I wasn't sure I should," Grace replied softly, "but Joy asked questions, and I believe in answers." Peter turned to the little girl. "You've grown," he said gently. "You look just like your mom." Joy stayed quiet, her small hand holding Grace's tightly. Peter looked back at Grace. "I'm sorry," he wiped his eyes, "not just for what I did recently, but for everything. For leaving when your mum was dying. For choosing shame over responsibility. For making you carry pain that should have been mine." Grace didn't speak for a moment, then she leaned forward, voice steady but soft. "You broke us," she said. "You broke her, and you nearly broke me." Peter nodded slowly, tears sliding down his cheeks. "But," she continued, "we healed, we found our peace, and I came today not to give you comfort." He lowered his head, bracing. "But to give you something harder." He looked up. Grace's eyes glistened. "I forgive you." He choked on a breath. "Why?" "Because I don't want to carry you anymore. I have dreams to build, and a little girl who needs love, not bitterness." She stood slowly and reached for Joy's hand. As they turned to leave, Peter stood, trembling. "Grace." She paused. "Thank you," he whispered, broken and undone. "You didn't have to, but you did. You're stronger than I ever was." Grace looked back one last time. "I had to be," she said, "because you weren't." Then she walked away, head high, soul light. Joy looked up at her. "Are you okay?" Grace smiled. "I am now." And as they stepped into the sunlight outside the prison gates, Grace felt something she hadn't felt in years. Release. Because true freedom doesn't always begin with escape. Sometimes it begins with forgiveness. The sun rose gently over the hills of City, casting golden light on the courtyard of the riverside estate. White lilies lined the aisle, golden chairs curved around a marble fountain. The breeze carried soft notes of a string quartet across the air. But even that music paused when Grace stepped forward. Her gown was flowing ivory silk, her hair tied in a soft bun. Her brooch shimmered gently on her dress. She walked alone, not because she had no one, but because this walk belonged to her. Every step carried the past, and honored it. At the altar stood Samuel, eyes misting. Joy stood nearby as flower girl, wearing a sash that read, "Future CEO." Diana sat in the front row, wiping away a quiet tear. When Grace reached Samuel, he whispered, "You made it." She whispered back, "We made it." "Do you, Samuel Wright?" "I do." "Do you, Grace Okoro?" "I do." When the rings were exchanged, the crowd rose. They weren't just witnessing a wedding, they were witnessing prophecy fulfilled. Grace turned to the sky, the same sky she once looked up at from the roadside, only now, she wasn't praying for a new life, she was walking in it. That evening Grace stood on the rooftop. No photographers, no gowns, just string lights and a sky painted in quiet purple. Samuel came beside her. "It feels like the end of something," he said. Grace shook her head. "Number, it's the beginning of everything else." He nodded. "You know what amazes me?" She looked at him. "You never let the mud keep you down. You turned it into soil." Grace smiled faintly. "And you? Samuel Wright, you watered the roots." They stood there in silence, overlooking the city they once watched from opposite worlds, now together, planted, rooted, blooming. The end. If you loved this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel for more captivating stories like this one.